The time was August 28th, 2018, when Tyler Lamont lost his cool. It was not a very proud moment of mine, but I can tell you since then I learned how to become the wind and how to enter the void, which has led me to become a wiser and more appreciative and calmer teacher and person. Welcome to the Teach Bigger podcast. Today we're talking about anger management and the power of not yelling.
Hey, I'm Chris Pratt,
I'm Chris Mosley.
And I'm Tyler Lamont.
and this is the Teach Bigger podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. Today's a really interesting topic because it's one that not a lot of people want to really discuss. And if they do discuss it, a lot of times it's an uncomfortable situation. And that is the subject of anger. Anger can be a detriment to the learning environment. And I've seen a lot of teachers and I've had a lot of experiences, including myself and apparently Tyler, where anger sort of rules the culture of the classroom. And so we want to dive into this today and kind of talk about the warning signs and the effects that it can have, and then some strategies to avoid it. Yeah. So to kind of get us started, Tyler, we appreciate your transparency. So you're an inspiration to the educational community.
I knew he was always angry. He's always angry.
Well, my whole goal is to yell and to to get kids. That's what I want to do. I want to get them.
Here's the thing: if you can scream at the kids, they will do what you say.
Yeah, you just got to scream. You got to scream really, really loud.
Yeah,
and then you have to do that, and then hit your hand on something. That's how it works.
And if you can time it to where like little droplets fly out of your mouth that the kids have to dodge, it's like effect. It's like bonus points. Then they really respect you.
Oh yeah, that's it.
No,
that's what I do every day.
Right. We're joking about this, but unfortunately this happens, okay? And it doesn't happen because anyone wakes up and says, I can't wait to yell at kids today.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's somebody that does that, but I feel really bad for them,
They shouldn't be teachers. If
right.
that's you, then you chose the wrong profession.
Here's the thing. I think that anger is something that you look back on and say, I think I was angry at that point. You don't realize it, I think, while you're going through it in the moment. But this is something that you can kind of look back on and say, you know what, maybe I could have handled that differently. Or I was an angry person. When you're in the moment, I don't think you realize it as much as you do after looking back. So this may be a self-reflection type of episode, or if you're a new teacher going into the education field, something you might want to proactively think about as you get into the classroom.
Right. So, I mean, for me, I think that the reason that I feel that I can kind of speak to this is because I've lived this. When I first got into education, I was a new teacher and I expected to walk into the classroom and everyone was going to sit down and be quiet and do what I said because that's what happens, right? It's school.
That's what they did in the 30s.
Right. When I was in school, back when it was like, K through 12 in one building, one room, that's how we did it.
There's still some schools today that are still like that.
You know what? There actually are. So, but a lot of things have changed since we've been in school. And, I think as a student, you don't always have the same, you don't have the same perspective. So, I mean, my perspective growing up in school is that kids did what they were told to do. I'm sure that was probably not my teacher's perspective. I was scared of my dad because he expected me to behave, which was good, and it kept me in check all the time. I mean, and I wasn't the kind of kid that was always looking for trouble, but I was social. I liked to talk, and but I would only get in trouble once or twice, Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot has changed in the classroom and in the learning environment. And so back then, I don't think that I thought teachers got that frustrated with us, and maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Probably they did, and we just weren't aware because we're like, la, 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 whatever. You're not really paying attention to life. But that being said, when I got out of college and I started teaching, my expectation was that kids come in, they sit down, they shut up, and they do what they're told to do. And I was in for a big surprise
Eh.
because I discovered that no kids sat down, no kids would shut up, and no kids
Yep.
would do anything I asked them to do, you know? And I'm like, is it me? And so I did, I think, what any normal person would do. I just yelled at them, right? I mean, I just sit down, you know,
Listen,
like
I would pay money to be like a little fly on the wall at your first year teaching.
It was
like
bad.
knowing you now, it would just make my day. I would pay money.
it was bad. It was really bad. And you know what is really scary is I had two really great mentors who worked with me every day. And I was probably way better than I could have been, or most people were, because I had them to guide me. So it's not like I was just thrown to the wolves and I didn't know what to do. But even with that help, I didn't know what to do. And it's different. It's one thing whenever your mentor or an administrator or your college professor or your other colleagues say, oh, just do this, this, and this. And they've been teaching for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, even 2 years, right? But then your first year, you get in, I'm like, I did everything you said, and those kids don't do anything that I asked them to do. And I think sometimes, you know, especially when you're a young teacher, I think it's because they know it. They smell it. They're like sharks, you know, it's like blood in the water. They know it.
Yeah, you know, and maybe maybe we can talk about that like on another episode, but there is like this, it's like these small little social gestures or whatever that you don't do as a first year teacher that that a seasoned teacher does. They're like super small and minute, but there's a bunch of them, so they add up. So then when kids come into the room, it feels different because you're not doing all of those small little things, and most of it's just like this confidence that you have, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Right.
That's probably a lot of it.
I make sure, like my first year teaching, I made sure never ever to say to any of them it was my first year.
Oh, well, sure. But they know.
But some do. Some make the mistake, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't tell anyone. like
Right.
my first year here at this new school, I'm excited to be here. That's about all they got.
Right.
So like teachers, I mean not teachers, not necessarily teachers because they know, but like parents, you know,
Sure.
and we had a bigger gap because we had middle school kids, so it was easier. High school kids can smell it even more, like they
Right.
can sense it.
Right.
Because you're closer to them.
It's like we always say, don't tell the kids your plan. Like, don't tell them the things they don't need to know, right? Agreed. But, you know, so looking back, my first year, it was a lot of yelling. And, you know, when I look at it, there wasn't a lot of learning. And the kids, for them, it was entertainment. And I think that was the part that was the most frustrating to me, is that no matter how hard I tried and no matter how frustrated I got and no matter what I did to try to command or demand authority, I was the sideshow. Like literally, it's like, I can't wait to get to his class so we can see what's going to happen today.
I'm sure
I was that teacher.
I'm sure you would turn all types of red.
All types of red.
I know it.
Okay, to be fair, what else were they gonna do in class? They weren't gonna learn, and they didn't have cell phones back then.
Yeah, I know.
That is true.
Like, so
I
what
know.
kind of
Before-
entertainment were they gonna have?
Right. You're exactly
You're
right
right.
about that.
That's true.
So here's the thing. I when I really think about it, I just lived in a state of frustration. Probably my first 3 years. I really struggled with getting kids to be engaged in the classroom. I really struggled with classroom management, with, you know, discipline and things like that. And it wasn't because I didn't like teaching my subject. It wasn't because I didn't know what to teach. It was because I realized I didn't know what I was doing. But you don't ever want to like admit that. And unfortunately, if you don't admit that to yourself, you can't get help. You know what I'm saying? Because I think we come out of college and we feel like we're expected to know how to do everything. But then the interesting thing is, on the side that I am now, as being like a mentor, teacher, an administrator, all these other things, like nobody expects you to know all that. But you feel like that they do. There's like this pressure to prove yourself. And,
Right.
you know, I mean, like you always say, Tyler, maybe we can do another episode, but like we need to talk about that pressure to prove yourself thing. Because that is toxic in education. Like,
But I don't know, teachers, we put that on ourselves.
I know. It's because the human nature is prideful.
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
just pride.
Well, and I can say that from like because when I first got hired, I knew what was expected of me. Like I knew what like so it's like I got hired and in my mind I was like I got hired to do this job and they picked me over the hundreds of other people that interviewed. I don't know how many people interviewed for my job.
It was only one. I'm
Um,
kidding.
so and maybe I was the bottom denominator. Maybe I was the only one
We
that
pulled your name out of a hat. Don't get all cocky and stuff.
the point is that like you're taught your whole life to do a good job, and if you don't do a good job at your job, then they will find somebody else to do your job.
Mm-hmm.
So like there I remember feeling that pressure a little bit, being like, okay, they hired me to do this, and I'm expected to do XYZ because I have the degree to prove that I can, and that's the job I got hired to do. And I told them in my interview that I'd be able to do it, and here I am, and I don't know how to do it, and all I'm doing is yelling at kids.
Right. Well, because at the end of the day, you did know how to do your job. You knew how to do your content. You knew how to teach it. You knew how to make students good at that subject matter. But what you didn't know how to do was how to engage students. And that's a totally different thing. And unfortunately, that is not a very well covered subject in college.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know, I can't speak for every university because I only went to my university, but I'll say this: at my university, I was being taught those courses by people who had not been in the classroom for 20 some odd years. So it's changed, just like it's changed since I've been there. I don't do the same things now that I would have done then, you know?
Well, in my undergrad, they taught us how to set up a room, and it was like a classroom. Like we had to make like our project was like you build your own classroom, and we had like a little box, whatever. You had like a little miniature thing. That's what we did. It wasn't about engaging kids. It wasn't about like how to get information to them. It was about
Setup.
Here's how your classroom is set up.
Like logistics.
So, I understand, and it was taught by someone who had not been in the public system for about 20 years.
Right. So
I think that's why teachers revert to yelling, because it becomes frustration. I was never frustrated with the amount of work that I had to do, but I was always frustrated with my lack of experience in the classroom, and that frustration with my lack of experience and my lack of knowledge came out in forms of yelling, because I didn't know how to engage these kids. And I didn't know how to do my procedures. I didn't know how to do whatever. So then I just started fussing. And then that almost became my security blanket, because it was like, well, I'll just plan this much because I know that they're going to be running around the room. That's all that they can handle. Well, no, they probably could have handled more if I would have planned more. But I was too busy yelling at them because I didn't have enough planned. I didn't have enough planned because I was too busy yelling at them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I can tell you my story, my tipping point, and I'll never forget it. I was in front of the band, and there's my percussion section, and I'm a percussionist, so it hurts me to say that it was the percussion section that was acting up, but they were just acting a fool. And it was this one student who had been acting up constantly, and it builds. It's not usually something that just, you explode, you know what I mean? And I remember just screaming and like yelling at this kid in front of everybody. And afterwards, probably even in the middle of it, I remember thinking like, what did that prove? Like, what did that do? Because like I brought the kid into the office, and I was heated, and I was trying to talk to her, but I was way too heated to talk to her about anything. And like I made the student cry, and I'm like, and in the moment, and even like especially afterwards, I was like, what did I accomplish? This kid now hates band. She now hates percussion. She now hates me. She probably hates school. I probably just ruined her for the rest of the day because I had her second period. She's probably going to be in a bad mood forever. Like, like I like big bad grown up here.
Right.
What did I actually accomplish? The answer is nothing.
Nothing. Right. Yeah. So I think like, let's take a minute and let's kind of brainstorm, why do teachers yell? And I get it. There's probably a lot of people listening to this podcast right now going like, I don't ever yell at my kids. And I mean, great. I would say thank you. But I think there's also people that are either going to say, I know what you're talking about. I used to struggle with that. Or they're going to say like, oh my gosh, this is me, And wherever you are on that, I think we're going to be able to learn from this conversation, because the goal is that students feel safe, that teachers feel safe, and that kids learn. That's the goal, you know? And so an environment where we're creating intimidation or we're driven from anger or frustration is not an environment that's going to be most productive for student growth. You might get things accomplished and you might get tasks done, but that doesn't mean that it's going to have a lasting effect in a positive way. So my first thing is I have to share this thought because this was a turning point in my career, okay? And it was long after I had stopped being a yeller, okay? So I actually left the teaching profession twice in my life, okay? And one of the major driving factors for me was because I didn't do good classroom management and I was always mad. I was just frustrated. Every day I would come to school and here comes first period and these same kids are going to do the same things and I'm going to do the same thing. And every day I'm mad and this is not the way I want to be. I'm an angry person and I don't want to be this way. Now, maybe I was an extreme case. Maybe I'm terrible, but I've walked the halls of my school and I see teachers that have that look on their face the same way I felt. Like if the bell rings and the doors open and your first thought is, oh no, that's a bad place to be, you know? And I've thought
I think that every day.
Well, it's true. Like you don't want to spend your whole career being miserable, right? Mm-hmm. And if what's making you miserable is the environment, we've got to change it, you know? Mm-hmm. So long after once I kind of like left the teaching profession and came back and like, you know, had a whole life change and I came back with the right heart and the right reasons. And I kind of realized there's another way to do this. And that's when I really started my journey of understanding like how to engage kids.
This is the first time. So the second time that you came back, is that when we first started teaching together?
Yes.
Okay. And that's what I need. That's why I need to put a pin on.
Yes. So what had happened before Mosley and I began teaching together, I had taught for almost 5 years. Mm-hmm. And those were my bad 5 years, right? And I left. Right. I left for almost 2 years. And then I came back. And when I came back my first year, I didn't teach with Mosley. But then my second year, I started teaching with him. And so I kind of had a year under my belt to figure out like my philosophy and my thinking. And then that's when we kind of started developing our little team here.
And so my first year teaching, I don't think it was like most because I got a chance to team teach. And I team taught with Chris. Mm-hmm. And he was not like anyone I've ever worked with or even knew really at the time. But we were like really alike on a lot, like personality wise and just kind of how we thought. But he was way ahead of me as far as just like being in front of kids. So I came from a place where, you know, one of my past teachers, he was a yeller. Mm-hmm. And like, it was not even like intimidating really because we were all college kids. And he would just yell, I think because he wanted things to be a certain way, like sound a certain way. And he didn't know exactly how to do it. And so that was his default. And me looking back, I was like, man, I wish if I could go there now, we can get so many things done and I could get the result that he wanted and I wouldn't have to yell because I know how to do it. So I think like he would do that as a point of like motivation, and through his frustration, we kind of just, you know, met like closed the gap of what he wanted. And so I think like starting that in my mind was kind of how maybe I would have been in default. And then, you know, started teaching with you. Mm-hmm. It was weird because I've never met someone who's like so calm in what they did. And so I was like, well, he's just like the same, you know, like very calm, like how he responds. I really like your vocabulary, like how he got words to the kids. And so I just tried to imitate that as much as possible. And I didn't get a chance to really do that into my own until you were not around, mm-hmm. you know, and then I had to move districts. But because you had your bad first 5 years, you left and came back, mm-hmm. and then you were a certain way, then you kind of helped me, like set me off on the correct trajectory to be calm and be able to, respond. Now, it took a while for me to be able to like find exactly how, the balance. But I think, that's something to think, is that it's not too late for anyone who's listening to be able to like take a step back and realize, hey, I'm doing this because of this, this, and this. And I think if I can either like maybe take out the personal side of it, think about planning or something, lower your anxiety, then you can come at a point of more being centered, and you'll be able to connect even more. Because whenever you're like angry or yelling or whatever, the kids are not able to get the content part of it. They just get the emotion. Like they respond to the emotion, not the content.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing to take away from that, is whenever you're like in the moment or whatever, if you're mad, the stuff that you're trying to say is not going to come through. They're just going to pay attention to the emotional side of it, because it's a human thing. So
Now, let me tack on this thing, is that if you do yell at your kids, if you do like that bottled up, because like annoyance over time equals anxiety, or plus anxiety, and not knowing what to do equals anger, and then you will blow up. Like in my situation, the next day I took that student aside and I apologized to them. And, and I had a one-on-one conversation, and she also apologized for acting a fool in the back. And, we talked about it, and it turned out that, taking that time to readjust the emotional level of what we had, it improved my class. So, and I don't think that came from me blowing up and yelling. I think that came from me talking to the student and me owning up that I made a mistake. I feel like there was and I can say that there's a lot of teachers that I had growing up that they yelled, and then they would know that they were wrong, but they would never admit that they were wrong. So then there was just always like this tension, always there in this unstable environment where, well, you yelled at me and you were wrong, and everybody knows you're wrong, but you're too proud to admit that you're wrong. And I think if a teacher takes the time to admit that they're wrong, one, it's going to help them calm down, and they're probably not going to get as bad later on, because you're admitting your faults and you're trying to grow through them. You know what I mean? You're trying to grow through it, kind of thing. And then the kids will pick up on that, and I think that they will help out, or they'll really appreciate that, and they're going to be more receptive to you if you do that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, I like what you're saying, because I think that's what we have to realize is, like, education and teaching, it's a human thing, right? And there's the teachers, the educators, who are just humans. They're people with emotions. They're people with goals. They're people with dreams. They're people with fears and frustrations and failures behind them. And so are the kids, and so are the parents. And so I think that we have to remember that wherever we're feeling this toxicity or this toxic culture, the learning environment's not strong, it's because human emotion has gotten involved. It's not because of the content. Math doesn't make you mad. Okay? It's how you respond to it.
Right now,
it makes me sad.
When I look at my check account.
Right, exactly. So here's the thing. I think what we have to do is we have to take a look at, like, what are triggers? What causes? Okay, if I'm a teacher and I'm having a bad day and I yell at the kids once, that's one thing. But when this becomes my method of discipline, or this becomes my method of delivery, or whatever the case may be, then we're doing something else. Okay, so I think the first thing that I would like to point out is this. One of my old superintendents said this, and it was such a powerful statement at the time. Okay, he was talking about administration and leadership and leading the district and building culture in the midst of COVID and in the midst of the shutdown. And, there were high levels of anxiety. There were high levels of frustration, with the mandates and the government regulations and, not knowing this and not knowing that. And he said, what we have to remember is this, that annoyance plus anxiety equals anger. It causes anger. And I really stopped to think about that, and I immediately shifted it to my personal life. And I thought of the times that I get mad. And what makes me get mad? Well, it's one thing to be annoyed. Okay. So, like, for example, I have a 5-year-old, I have a 3-year-old, and I have a 10-month-old. Okay. And there are things that my children do that are just annoying because they're kids, but it doesn't make me mad. It's just like, hey, stop doing that. That's really annoying. Like, stop saying that over and over, or whatever the case may be. You know, kids are kids. But I'm not mad. It's just annoying. And so it's like, hey, stop. Okay, let's not do that anymore. And then there are things that cause you to be anxious, right? And I think, like, for educators, that list has become insurmountable in the midst of COVID. Like, anxiety levels are extremely high. Okay. Again, I take it down to me being a parent, you know, like, so for example, when my daughter watches YouTube sometimes, because, you know, we'll give her some screen time and whatever, and we're trying to teach her to make good choices and making sure that she's right, watching the right things. We have filters on. Okay. So we're not just totally free, wild, wild west. Okay. But, you know, there's a few shows, and one of our rules is she's not allowed to watch any child on YouTube that's older than her, right? She has to watch age appropriate. Like, it has to be kids her age. She can't watch teenagers putting on makeup and all this other stuff because you're 5. Okay. That's just one of our things. And so there are times when she messes up on this, and, you know, we'll be monitoring it, and it's like, no, you can't pick that. And for me, that begins to cause some anxiety in me, because my thought is like, oh, I don't want her to be exposed to something that it's going to be in her brain, and then she's going to start thinking this way. And, like, I've got to protect that. I've got to be that parent, and that's my role. So that can cause anxiety, right? But again, that doesn't make me mad. It causes that, right? But then when I couple those two, I'm annoyed at a situation, and then that situation makes me anxious and upset. Then the result is me having an outburst. Right? Mm-hmm. That's when I get frustrated to the point that I yell, or whatever the case may be. Now, maybe this is not the tried and true rule for every person in the world, but I think that if you really think through that progression, you can find that, like, coupling annoyance and anxiety together can really cause a lot of anger. Okay. And at the very least, frustration. Right. And so when we're looking at the whole idea of, like, people yelling at their kids to get control. Okay. I had a teacher that I taught with once, and I was his mentor, and he was a 2nd-year teacher, and I came in and took over the band program, right? And this was after I had taught with Mosley, and actually this was the school when I left where Mosley and I were teaching together, right? So I left a really great team environment, and I went into an environment where, you know, this other teacher, we had never worked together before, and so, like, I had to build that relationship and that culture, and we got along really well. And but the first thing I noticed the first day that we started teaching, the very first day, is he screamed at kids all day long. And I don't ever scream at kids. And I'm like, but I used to. And I was like, man, what is going on? You know? And so I would just kind of sit back and watch and try to help him and try to figure out, like, what's the cause of this? And I can tell you, with him, it was a lot of anxiety and a lot of annoyance, right? So he was fitting in that formula pretty well. But, you know, one day, he had a really rough day, and it was like he had lost his temper multiple times. And it was after class, and he was just sitting at his desk, and he just had this look on his face like, I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore, you know? And so he shared with me that he had known another teacher who had said this phrase to him, and it was ringing in his ears, and he knew that it was right, but he just didn't know how to overcome it. And it was this: that when you yell at anyone, not just kids, so, like, you can apply this to your personal life too. When you yell, what you're saying is, I'm afraid and I don't know what to do. Because if you think about it, why do I need to get to a point to exert my authority over someone if I'm not trying to gain control of the situation? Right? And why am I gaining the control of the situation? Because I'm uncomfortable. And I want to be in control. And when I stopped and thought about that, I was like, man, that is so powerful, because suddenly, whenever I am not afraid and I do know what to do, yelling is not on my list. I never go like, now it's time to yell. I mean, that's not ever my method of operation, because I know what to do. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I had also learned a few years before that this really powerful statement. And I mean, this is like, I don't know, Teach Bigger quote number 252 or whatever. So, like, get it out there, right? It's this: The way you treat others is a reflection of the way you feel about yourself. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, whenever I realized that, like that
Now,
frees.
I heard that, and then
It's
I
because
think
I
I heard
told it
that
to
once.
you. I told it to
Uh,
you.
no, I don't think so. I think I heard it
I
first.
think I came up with it actually. I
And
think
then I
that's a me
told you,
thing.
Pratt, and it changed your life because you were ugly to me, and then that's how things changed. And then all of a sudden you became way better. I think that's what it
No,
was.
because I heard this before I was teaching with
Incorrect.
you.
Objection. Objection.
Anyways,
Fact check him.
overruled.
Pull it up.
Overruled.
Okay.
We're
Yeah,
moving forward.
exactly.
Look, I'll fact check him.
So
I know.
look, here's the thing.
Okay, and then that made me think about something because I had a turning point too. It's a
Mm-hmm.
small turning point, but go ahead. It's not as big as Tyler's, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, all I was going to say is whenever you really think about that, like when you have, when you're having a good day, things are going well, you treat people that way. Hey, how's it going? You know, like you're in a good mood. You want to be around people. You want to talk to people. You want to brighten their day. But when you're having a bad day, you're like, get out of my way. I don't want to be anywhere near you. It has nothing to do with those people. You're treating them how you feel. And it's the same thing whenever we fly off the handle and we're screaming and yelling at kids, it's because we are not content with who we are as a teacher. So I just think those two things are something to really think about because it's not the kid's fault. I'm not saying there aren't bad kids, but how we respond is our choice. Okay, go ahead, Mosley.
Right. You know, quick little share because I don't have many of these moments, but I remember this is like the one story I remember from my first year teaching, and we were not teaching at the same time. Like we had two different classes, so it was like it was my percussion class, and
Of course it was.
I'm not a percussionist, and they were like first period, right? And these kids were super funny. Like they treated me fine, but they were mean to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sixth graders, and I don't remember what happened, but I was like, getting in the moment or whatever, and I went to my teacher voice. I was like, listen. I was like, you know what? And I marched over to the board, boom, 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 whatever, and I was like writing on the board, and then I walked away. I was like, if your name goes on the board, it's because you have detention. And then one kid, like, Mr. Mosley, that says detention. like in my question, like be mad and whatever, like I misspelled detention, right? And then one kid called out, and then like I just laughed, and then they laughed, and then it was like over. Like they were everything, all that whole moment was just gone, and then we just kind of like went over, and then I think they saw that I had like lightened up, I guess, and then everything from that on, I was like, it wasn't that serious, and they made me laugh. So that's the only moment I remember that I was like in the moment and like yelling, not yelling, but I was like aggressive because I didn't know what to do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was gonna say that when you yell at a kid, especially if you're a yeller and you're constantly doing it, like my band director when I was growing up, he was a yeller. He was all about intimidation and being, you are afraid of me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was his thing and how it was. I didn't know any better. Like I thought that was normal. And I'll never forget, like it was when I was in college and I was on the drum line in there, and I had the director of bands or whatever, like the person who was like in charge of everything. She was drumming on my drum, and I messed up. And I remember I messed up, and then like my eyes got all big, and like it was in front of like everybody, and like I remember feeling my entire body tense because I was like bracing myself for the belittlement. I was like bracing myself for the yelling, and she was just like, "You'll be fine. You'll get it. You'll get it soon enough." And I just was like, and I didn't realize how tense I was until she laughed, and then my whole body went like relaxed, and I was like, "Whoa, I have been conditioned to be yelled at. This is probably not good." And that was one of those moments where I was like, I probably shouldn't do this when I become a teacher.
So we've shared some of our experiences, how we've dealt with anger, kind of some of our past leading up to the reasons why we did certain things. Now we're all experienced teachers. I think today we're going to give you just some of the things we've learned throughout our years to help you deal with some of these issues.
Yeah, and there's no perfect thing. I can't say do A, B, C, or D, because as we've talked about, it's a personal thing. It's a mindset. It's a decision that you make about how you're going to approach things. But I definitely think there's some tools that we can use to help you avoid getting to that point of anxiety or annoyance or frustration or whatever the case may be, if you're someone that's really struggling with being able to control yourself in situations. So go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say that I think it starts with like not like putting the pride aside and not seeking out conflict. I feel like there might be a part of being a person or part of being and maybe just being a human that we don't want to be wrong,
Hmm.
and we always want to be right, and we want to fight that we're right
And I think
always.
it's that we want to feel a sense of control. And especially in a teacher, because we know we have the responsibility of controlling the classroom. So when the classroom
It's
is
your
not
classroom. It's
right,
your
it is.
classroom.
So when the classroom's not in control doing exactly what you want, somehow it you want that control back. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing because by all means the teacher needs to have control. But there's a difference between having control and forcing control.
Yeah, and I think if you put that on the side, because I know that when I'm redirecting student behavior, I am now consciously and maybe even subconsciously looking for the route of least resistance.
Hmm.
Like just the other day, I had one student in my class. He kept having his phone out, and I like went over to him calmly and I whispered in his ear. I was like, "Hey man, like I don't want to, but if I have to, I'll take that phone. I need you to put it away." And very aggressively, he was like, "You're not taking my phone."
Hmm.
And at that moment, like the old me would have been like, well, I'll take that phone if I have to take that phone. You know what I mean? And push
Yeah.
push back.
Hmm.
But instead, what I did is I met it with, like they call it the compliment sandwich or whatever.
Hmm.
And I was just like, you're doing really good work for me. You've turned everything in. You have an A in my class right now. I'd really hate for it to get ruined and for
Hmm.
us to be on a bad note because you're on social media. Just put it away. And he didn't say anything about it at all. There was no comeback because I didn't meet him with the same heat that he met me.
Hmm.
See,
So
I,
That is signs of like experience, because like your first year teaching, you don't have like the tools like to handle it, because I think like you have to have time to come into your teacher, like
mhm,
you have to you become Mr. Lamont. Like your first year teaching, you're Tyler, and you probably would have said something quick and snappy because you're quick witted, but you
mhm.
realize that in the long run you won't get the result that you want. Like you have to kind of think ahead and think on a different level to get the responses that you need. That just takes time. It takes time.
Yeah, and what I've noticed is that that student is not the only one that's just one that's happened within the last like 2 weeks.
Hmm.
It's like there's like this impact that happens in the learning environment when you keep yourself calm and
Hmm.
you shelf that pride, because like he met me that hard or that hot because, and I could feel that he was used to being yelled at,
hmm,
Hmm.
and he didn't know how to respond to me when I didn't yell at him,
Yeah.
right.
and then I kept my cool.
I
Hmm.
think that's powerful. So I mean, I think like the first thing to becoming a wiser teacher and being able to handle every situation is stay calm. Like you have to
Yeah.
choose to stay calm, and sometimes that means you don't respond right away.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I've had a kid be somewhat disruptive in the class, and I don't just immediately just stop and attack them. Sometimes
Hmm.
I don't say anything until the next day, or
Hmm.
at the end of class, because the goal is to get the kid to change the behavior, not to attack them and belittle them in the
Mhm.
moment.
Hmm.
And yes, you can attack them in the moment and it might change some behavior for a moment, but it's not going to change the child, you know?
No.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, uh-huh.
No, go ahead. Yeah, you're right.
No, well, and the other thing I was going to say that Tyler really hit on, and I think that this is a powerful like thing to keep in your mind is this. It was about not putting the kid in a situation where they could be defensive, right?
Hmm.
Yes.
So, like, if I come to a kid and I'm like, why are you always talking in my class? I'm letting them be defensive because now they can yell at me and tell me all the reasons that they hate my class.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
Yeah,
know?
why they're not.
So,
Yeah.
why am I going to approach it that way? Because really, the problem is the kid is not on task, right?
Hmm.
For a
Mhm.
myriad of reasons. Maybe it's because they're bored. Maybe it's because they want to be on social media. Maybe it's because they want to talk to their friends. Whatever the case may be. So instead, this is something I learned a long time ago, and a lot of people probably heard of it. It's nothing new. Okay, it's called a coupling statement, and I think coupling statements are one of the best ways to diffuse bad behavior, or off-task behavior, I should say. And it works just like this. Instead of coming to a kid and saying, why are you talking in my class? Or why aren't you doing your work? Instead, don't ask them a question. You already know the answer. They don't want to, because people do what they want to do. He doesn't want to do the work. That's why he's not doing it. Okay. But instead, tell them their behavior and then tell them what they need to do. So instead, if I come and say, hey, you're on social media, you need to be finishing your assignment, and then walk away. There's no argument, because he is on social media and he does. That's not personal. That's a fact. And I found that 99% of the time, kids don't say a word because they're like, oh. And then they usually comply. They usually do what is asked. Yeah. But I could come to that kid the same way and be all frustrated and ask, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing your work? And all I'm doing is escalating a situation that doesn't have to be escalated.
Yes.
So that's, I think that's the first thing, like to consider the way you approach the situation, and don't bring it as a fight, but bring it as a fact.
Coupling statements. That's really good. Write that one down.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's what that was called. I've been
because he's done it. I got that from you.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah. I mean, I do that all the time, and from you, Pratt. But I didn't know that that's what it was called.
Well,
I'm sure he. Listen, I'm sure he took it from somebody. So let's not get.
I will say, my first year of teaching that was really bad. That's one of the techniques that my mentor showed me, and so I loved to see how ridiculous I could make my coupling statements. It was like a game for me. Like, hey, your finger's in your nose. Instead, it needs to be writing on your paper. You know, like, or whatever the case may be, like, hey, you're running in the halls. Instead, you need it, you know, whatever. I mean, like, you can use it in any situation. And if you're a hall, if you do duty, right? Duty is the best place to practice your coupling statements, because every kid in the hallways is looking for a fight with a teacher. That's what they're looking for. They enjoy it because you don't know me and you can't write me up because you don't know me, right? And that's kind of the way kids think in the hallways. Like they think they're anonymous and nobody knows me because I'm in the hallway. And so instead of being like, slow down, then that just lets them run faster, right?
Yeah.
Instead, hey, you're running, you need to walk.
And be careful.
Right. I mean, that's all it is. It's just that easy. So, I mean, sometimes you've just got to like think about how to approach that and make it a part of your teaching vocabulary, and it gets easier and easier. So what else? Yeah. What else is on the list?
Well, I mean, not like bulleted point, but as Tyler was talking about like being calm, I think as I guess transitioned over to the Mr. Mosley and left the Chris side. Because as Tyler, like Tyler, I'm quick with it and I can come back with the cutback, like, you know, real quick. And I realized that a lot of the things, like, to not take it personal. So I removed myself from a lot of the situations. So like if a kid had an attitude, I would totally ignore it. And I would just like kill him with kindness. And then they didn't really know how to respond. And so like, even if they were like, they got over it, like it kind of just really quick, like not disrespect, not that, but just like your normal or like small attitude, or if you notice a kid had a bad day or something like that, and, you know, wouldn't push, or if they responded how you wouldn't necessarily want, I just started taking myself out of it, and not personally become affected. And then I was able to respond from a calm center, and they can get a calm response, not an emotional response. And then I noticed that I had less and less issues because I was not an emotional responder. So I think that's something, because you know how to say certain things, like you get certain tools like coupling statements, you know, different classroom management tools and stuff like that to kind of have in your toolbox and stuff. So you use those and you're able to, I don't go like, I don't want to say fight it off, but you're able to like deflect, you know, like if a kid says something, you're like, psh, you know, like, you know, like armor up, and you can say like whatever, you know, and that the longer you teach, the more you teach, the more you have things like that. So don't be personally invested in like small things, like just take yourself out of it. And I think it'll help you stay calm.
100%. And I you'll be happier at the end of the day too. Because I mean, I know this is something that I still struggle with too, is that when a kid has been extremely disrespectful to me, maybe they personally went out of their way to do something disrespectful to me, and I keep a calm head. I'm still talking to them. Like I handle this situation. I I struggle with leaving that at school, and then but because it'll be playing over my head over and over and over again, and you got to learn how to not to take that personal, like because I mean, like I'm 29 years old, they are 14. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like you
Mm-hmm.
can't take what they say like personally. You just can't. And I think I've really grown in that regard, that I've really started disconnecting myself, and I've started to enter the void, as some would say.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
so what does
s-
that mean exactly?
that means that I've become the wind.
Oh my.
Oh
People
my God.
scream and it just goes through me. No, but seriously, is that I've really learned how to emotionally detach myself from certain things. So like I know a lot of teachers are experiencing a lot of stress that kids aren't turning in work, or they're probably getting really angry emails from students that are spelled bad. Like I'm getting a lot of those right now too. But although I still care about that student and I do want them to do good, I've taken my personal like investment out of that, I guess to say. So like I'm not personally getting upset with, well, this kid didn't do this, or this kid personally tried to personally attack me with it. I'm just letting it go through me because I'm the adult and they are the kid. And I have disconnected myself from that because I'm over here and they're over there. I don't know if I explained that well enough or not. Y'all, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So, coupling statements, not overreacting, like becoming the wind, as Tyler
Uh-huh.
said, right?
That
Yeah.
sounds so dumb. It sounds
Uh,
cooler in my head.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think another great strategy is this, and we could do an entire episode about this, so I'm just going to hit on it briefly. But it's the
okay.
use of social contracts, right? And not putting a kid on a social contract necessarily because they have bad behavior, but creating a social contract for your classroom, okay? And
Mhm.
to where you and your students sit down as a team, as a classroom, as a cohort, and you say, how are we going to treat each other? And you list those adjectives, or those verbs, I'm sorry. And you say, like, these are the things we're going to do, or these are the things we're not going to do. And it comes from the kids. They have that ownership. And then throughout the year, when a kid goes astray from the classroom contract, you can bring it back to them and say, hey, remember when you signed this and you agreed with all of our other students that you were going to be respectful? Well, I felt like what you did today wasn't respectful. So I want to give you an opportunity to get back on track. That completely changes the approach. And if
Mhm.
you don't create a social contract and you don't have that strategy already in place, you don't have that foundation to lean on. So just a social contract can totally change the way that you create a culture in your class. And I think that's another thing. You have to be intentional about creating the culture in your classroom. And if it is one that's calm, that's respectful, then it changes the way kids perceive the classroom.
Yeah, you have to be the culture and you have to preach the culture. So you can't just stand up and preach in front of your kids that you need to be calm and da 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 da, and like you need to be a good person. And then, but if you're not emulating that and modeling that for them, and showing the way and like living the way, I actually kind of hate it when people say like model the way. Like don't just model the way, live the way. Be what you
Be
preach.
the way.
Yeah, be be the way, be the wind.
Right.
but but no, for real though, like I try to preach to my kids that they need to stay calm during interactions and altercations and things like that happen inside the class. And then I also try to show that because I want to be like that in general.
Right.
So I don't have overreactions, even when it's something that catches me off guard. I mean, of
Mhm.
course, I'm human, like things happen and they do catch me off guard, but I try to make sure that I don't overreact to the extent where I'm blowing up on somebody or something of that nature. Because
Mhm.
remembering, if you blow up on a kid or on a class, it might get the class to be real quiet for the next 5 minutes.
Right.
But it's gonna be a short high, man. It's gonna fleet like that.
Yeah.
Well,
Now,
exactly. Uh-huh.
oh no, I was saying another strategy that can
Well,
help, and we're kind of done.
before you say
Okay.
that, I want to follow up with what Tyler said, and it's just simply
Okay.
this. I think that in a nutshell brings us to probably what is the most important strategy, which is building a positive relationships with your students. And all of these things will help you get there. And whenever you make relationships the focus of the classroom, you're going to avoid so many of these problems to begin with. There are, you can use coupling statements all the day, but if kids don't know that you love them, and if kids
Hmm.
don't respect one another, it doesn't matter if you couple them or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that has to take precedence for sure. But okay,
Mhm.
now lastly, Mosley, go ahead.
No, so another strategy, and we talked about this in our season one, and it's just a classroom management tool, a quick thing that like we put into our daily practice, and doing these on a consistent basis helps with the classroom culture, and it helps us because it sets the kids on the right page. We call it the Power Five. I forgot what episode it was
Yeah,
in
it was
season one,
actually
but
okay. So it's season 1, episode 4. So
yeah,
if you haven't listened to that episode, or maybe you haven't
yeah,
listened to it in a
and we
while, go back and check that out because we'll talk about it in great detail there.
yeah, and more detail.
Yeah, but
Um,
no, go
okay.
ahead. Sorry.
No,
I'm so
no,
excited about these powerful 5
I know,
things.
right? Yeah.
Right.
So it's Power Five. So it's five quick things that you can do every day, and that will create the culture that will help with lowering anger and anxiety.
Yeah.
Number one is my class, my voice. It's just a lot of kids, they have a lot of different teachers and a lot of different expectations. They have the hallway and all that. One thing you want to do is make sure the kids are adjusting to your expectations, and hearing your voice when they come into your room helps them know, okay, now I'm on Mr. Pratt's time or Mr. Lamont's time. And then it doesn't matter what you say. Hey guys, come on in, you get your things, blah, blah, blah. It can be the same thing every day. You can change it up, but they need to hear your voice to know that you're present, and it's like change their minds to calibrate to your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my class, my voice, and that needs to be done every day. Um, Two is a routine route. And what that is procedures you start and put in place at the beginning of the year, where they put their bags here, backpacks here. You have their pencils out. Make sure you have your binder. You go get your whatever art supplies, then you come to your desk. You sit here. Whatever you have in place, that's what they need to be doing every day, because that's something that they can count on. That lowers their anxiety about what's going to happen, because they know what's going to happen. And what you can do in my class, my voice, is to make sure to remind them of what they're going to do during the routine route. Okay, so one, my class, my voice. Two, the routine route. The third one is the still skill. Okay, that's just after they do all that, get them in and get them still, so you can give them instruction. Okay, it's a lot of power in getting them to just stop moving, look at you when you talk, and even if it's for a little second, like a brief second, it's power in having them to stop everything so they can receive instruction. Okay, that might take some time, but if you can do that, you will see how that pays dividends. And then the fourth one is positive punch. Give them some type of positive, inspirational, motivational thing to get them going. Hey guys, we have this to do today, and you're going to do great. You're going to hit them hard, hit them low, or whatever. And that's like the thing we talked about earlier. You have the positive thing as you're getting into more content. So it starts a class on a positive day, and then the last one is grab and go. Give them a bit of content and then send them on their way to do what they have to do, or you can start your lesson. So you have to get their attention, and then you may start. So all those things, if you incorporate that, and it doesn't have to take a long time, incorporate that into what you do, you'll see that your anxiety will be lower, and the kids too. So
Right. And so a lot of that just comes down to preparation and planning. Like you have to prepare. You have to be prepared, because there's nothing that makes a teacher more anxious than when they don't feel prepared. And so I would encourage people, like, you know what? Practice your lesson, whether you practice it with like stuffed animals, in your kid's bedroom, or you practice it with a colleague, whatever the case may be. Don't be afraid to take the time. And it doesn't have to be in real time. It doesn't have to be 48 minutes of practice. It may be 5 minutes of just walking through it and talking through it, but make sure you have a plan and that you feel confident about where you're headed on that lesson. So anything else? Power 5. So go back and listen to it if you didn't. It's episode number 4 of season 1. So, that I think that's it.
Yeah.
There's no answer to, if you do this, you will never be mad again. That's not the point. The point is
Yeah.
we're all going to be in situations that are frustrating, that leave us feeling like we don't have control. But if we know how to handle that and we have a game plan of how we're going to respond in a situation, whether it's something we're going to say, maybe we're going to take a step back, whatever the case may be, it's going to prepare us so that we do not become that teacher who only gets students to behave because of intimidation and yelling, because that is not what we signed up for.
And that will be short lived.
Short-lived. And that is not there's no one that you're going to go to and say, hey, what kind of learning environment do you enjoy? And they're going to say, the kind where I scream at kids. That's not ever the answer. And hopefully, I mean, like, surely not. If it is, email us. We'd be interested to talk to you. So,
Well, and remember that you're constantly modeling the behavior that these kids are going to emulate and have when they grow up.
yeah.
So, like, if your tactic is fear mongering and yelling and intimidation, then when these kids grow up and become like parents or become teachers or become whatever, they're going to remember, well, how did it work with me? Oh, well, Mr. Lamont, we were afraid of him. And that's why we did everything, because he was afraid. Well, I'm going to make sure that all my employees are afraid of me. Like, and you might be sitting there thinking like, well, that's ridiculous, but it's true, because they're going to fall back on what they actually know. And I personally think the big takeaway of this, in order for you to make sure you don't lose your cool, is to always remember that you're an adult and that they are a child.
Yeah.
And whatever they say, like, you're rubber and they're glue.
That's so good. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's so good. Like, I told my assistant, like, after Pratt left me and just like, disappeared for whatever, she would get super upset with the kids, like with the kids doing things. I said, hey, dear, let me just tell you this. They're 11. Some of them still use the restrooms on themselves. Don't let that affect you.
Right.
And she just was like, oh, you're right.
Right.
So remember that. That's a great point, Tyler.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's really good.
I tell my friends all the time when we're playing video games, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna let you finish being mad and raging and like throwing your remote and stuff, but I'm just gonna remind you that it's Minecraft. And then they and then they feel real bad about themselves. So like, I mean, like, hey, you can finish like being angry in your room or whatever, but I'm gonna remind you that they're 12.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the way you treat others is a reflection of the way you feel about yourself. So let's remember that.
Yeah.
So, hey, thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully, you feel inspired to really just take a deep breath and be the best.
Go yell at somebody.
Right. Be the best you. Be the best you that you can be tomorrow. So, thanks for tuning in. If you're not already subscribed, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. So that way, every time we come out with a new episode on Monday and Wednesday, you get the notification and you can stay up to date with everything that we're discussing. If you have ideas for a show or you have some questions, feel free to email us. Our email address is info@teachbigger.com. And lastly, if you haven't already, go to our YouTube channel, Teach Bigger, and check out some of the new tech tips and different things like that we have for you. Hopefully you'll find it as a great resource, and we're constantly putting new content on there on a weekly basis. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back with you here next time.
Go teach big.
Go teach big.